really, it's great to see everyone here this evening. Thank you for taking the time. We're seeing so many familiar faces. This is actually one of the most popular panels that we've put together. So it is going to be a very exciting and dynamic evening. Everyone knows we have a Savvy Ladies helpline. And if you have any personal questions following or during this that you would like to submit to our helpline, we will match you with a financial expert, a planner, an advisor to help you through your financial questions and put you on that right path. So please use the Savvy Ladies helpline. It is growing every day. We are here to answer your questions. No question is okay to ask. So please, we are here to answer those. Tonight's panel, as we've been speaking about, is just a really strong panel, a group of really great supporters of Savvy Ladies. We are here to talk about setting yourself up for that secure financial future. Super important. If you're thinking about divorce, going through divorce, for all of us, we all want that secure financial future. As women, we are living into our 80s and 90s. And if we are in, where we are in our journey, we need to prepare for those next decades. So how do we prepare for the longevity of our life is really important for ourselves and our family. Really happy and thankful today to want to share that. And we thank Gary Rosen and Markham for supporting Savvy Ladies, Maggie Patrick, a great supporter of Savvy Ladies as a sponsor and helpline volunteer. Rona Wexler, you've been a champion of Savvy Ladies for many, many years. Thank you for joining us today and joining as a sponsor. And Melina, we're thrilled that you are here to continue sharing your insights and expertise as a coach. We're thrilled. I know it's been a pleasure getting to know you these last couple of years, and thank you for joining the panel. I'm happy to introduce our two moderators this evening. Stacey Francis, you've all met, and I think many of you know her. She is our founder of Savvy Ladies. Savvy Ladies this year is celebrating our 20th year as an organization. It's really the inspiration of what Stacey has thought of and what she created 20 years ago when she was in her 20s, this amazing organization that we have now been growing and growing to be there as a resource for women. So pleased to have Stacey here moderating and sharing her time and wisdom and expertise with all of us. And Lisa Zeiderman is a rock star, a Savvy Ladies board member, a part of our executive board and vice president of our Savvy Ladies board. She is a mover and shaker. What I love about Lisa is she is really authentic and real. She tells it like it is, and she speaks the walk. What she tells you, she does herself. You need to read the article that she just was featured in the Wall Street Journal. It is absolutely fantastic. We will share it with you as one of the follow-ups from this. But it's really nice to know that the people here on this call today, on this panel, are real and authentic. And what they share with you as their expertise, it comes from their heart, and they mean it, and they are here to help. So in that, Lisa, I pass it to you to introduce our panelists tonight.
Sure. So it's really my great pleasure to introduce first Gary Rosen. Gary is a partner at Markham in the firm's valuation and forensic and litigation department. Gary is, speaking of rock stars, Gary is a rock star forensic accountant. Gary and his team find it. They are extremely thorough. They are very well experienced in terms of divorce matters and heavily litigated matters. And Gary is one of my go-to firms for sure. He and I work on a lot of matters together. And frankly, we work on those matters because I think he's really good. So we're thrilled to have you tonight, Gary. And then Maggie Patrick, I have known for years. She has been a lecturer actually at my firm, and many of my clients have utilized her as a financial advisor. She is with Morgan Stanley. Maggie understands divorce. She understands how to work with women and how to plan for their futures. And as I said, I've had many clients who are extremely satisfied with her, so I'm very excited to see her on this. We haven't seen each other since way before COVID, so welcome, Maggie. And Rona is what is called a vocational analyst. And Rona actually will analyze people's ability to earn. So she often testifies in litigated matters in court. She is very well known, and a lot of people utilize her to figure out if income should be imputed to a spouse or income should be imputed to any of you, for example. What is it that a person can do to earn income? What is the market like in the various areas that you're interested in? One of the things I like about Rona is that she always is interested in helping people find that niche area that they are most interested in when she's doing the evaluation. So I think that's really important. And then Melina, I have known Melina for years and years. Melina has experience in terms of divorce coaching, and she has a lot of wisdom. She's been divorced herself and has a child. And so she is really smart in terms of what to do and what not to do and how to get people through their divorce. She is an educator and a coach, and she is somebody to keep in mind as you're going through your divorce. So Judy, I'm handing it back to you. I think we lost Judy, so I'm handing it back to you, Stace.
There we go. So anyways, just wanted to make sure that you have all the important resources that you need. SavvyLadies.org. You can see if you go to the website, we have a fantastic helpline. So there's going to be ample time for questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and then if possible, we'll try and get through them as we go. We're going to be speaking till 7, and we'll open it up for Q&A for those of you who want to stay after 7. We'll probably sign off about 7:15. That being said, if you have a more detailed question or you just want a little bit more privacy with your question, please go to the SavvyLadies.org website. And on that website, you'll see our helpline. And we have fantastic experts similar to the individuals here. In fact, many of the people on this panel are Savvy Ladies Helpline volunteers. So I just want to share that for you so that you have those resources. You can work one-on-one with a volunteer who is an expert in the topic and subject that you are asking about through our helpline. So feel free to do that. And I'm going to kick it off by going over to you, Maggie. And Maggie is a certified divorce financial analyst, also a CFP. And I know you've worked with a lot of women thinking about divorce, going through and after. When you're talking to a woman who is starting the divorce process, what is your guidance to her of, these are the things that we need to start to think about to make sure that you're making the right decisions and that you're financially secure long-term?
Right. Yes. Thank you, Stacy. And thanks, Lisa, too, for inviting me here tonight. So nice to be here. I would say that, my first conversation with most women really boils down to 4 general areas that we need to think about. And this is really before, during, and after the divorce. We need to think about what are the family assets. We need to, I encourage women to have like a really good awareness of what they have. A lot of people, just bottom line, what do you have? A lot of people don't really know or don't have a really good sense in a detailed way of what they have as family assets. The second is lifestyle. People really need to know, how much do I cost every month? How much does it cost to maintain this lifestyle for myself and my family? So you need to know what your outgo is monthly. And that also includes the maintenance of your home and so on, all the costs associated with that. Number 3, you need to know or think about or begin to think about, what kind of career can I have? And I know Rona's going to speak about that. I need to sort of figure out, how much can I make? What am I worth? Can I make more? Do I need to make changes? Do I need to make adjustments? And then the last thing, and this is probably, I would say, the most important and the most ignored topic, is if I'm going to get divorced, how am I going to retire? That is, it's so off of people's radar when they're getting divorced because you're so stressed out, and yet at the same time you have to make all these important decisions. So that's really what I end up talking about with people is, how are you going to retire? What is your plan?
Yeah.
If you don't have a plan, let's make one. So that's what I do.
I know we'll reach out, and Gary's going to be talking a little bit about, finding assets, particularly if your spouse is not playing the game fairly. But Maggie, where are the typical things where she can go to start to get a good picture of what those assets are? And this is a situation where there's not hidden assets, knock on wood. Gary's great at
Right.
that. And, stay tuned. This is the spoiler alert for all of you. We have a little bit of that, spying and sleuthing down the line tonight even.
I love that. I love that you have that as a topic for your next event. Well, it's really interesting that you ask this, because this comes up all the time, because now we're in an era where almost everyone is like, I don't want to get paper statements. I want to just have
Right?
now, right? Everybody's just logging in to see their statements, which is awesome. But I would say at least half, if not much more than that, the women that I speak to don't know the login and password for the household assets. And Lisa's nodding her head because she sees this every day of the week. I can guarantee it. And so it's honestly kind of a tricky problem, because a lot depends on how cooperative the relationship is between spouses. So I would say, like, very early in the process, even if you're just thinking about it, find a way to log on to your household accounts. You really need to know everything that you have. There is no his and hers. When you are married, your accounts are your accounts together. So you need to know everything that is owned by the household. And that's both of you in both your names. So
yeah, and so really starting to put that together, creating your statement of net worth. Other states might call it a financial affidavit.
right.
Let's talk about, and I love how you talked about this as your lifestyle, because and you didn't say the B word. Does everyone know what the B word is?
The B word?
Yeah, budget. No one.
Oh.
we would lose our whole audience if we said this was about budgeting.
Well,
no one wants to talk
you
about.
Say that. It's very true. But what I often say, because that word is like, oh my gosh, it really just shuts everyone down.
It
right?
does, right?
It's glaze over.
Yeah.
You know what I just say? Just pull out your bank statement. Pull out your last 6 bank statements and just see what your outgo is.
Yeah, and that's because I feel like this part of it, I mean, getting a handle on the assets and liabilities is one thing, but getting a handle on the outflows can be a little overwhelming. Do you have any tips for women of getting clear about those expenses? Because I know that one of the biggest frustrations matrimonial lawyers have, and actually, quite frankly, financial professionals have, is when you look at a statement of net worth and you look at the budget and everything ends in a 0. Or maybe it's a step better, it ends in a 0 or a 5. But you know that what's happened is the person has guesstimated. And when we guesstimate, we typically underestimate what our real spending is, and making decisions about your future not knowing the full picture is really a tough, a very dangerous place to be. So do you have any tips of how to make that process a little bit easier? Because it's important during the divorce, but also after.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And for the longest time, every time I met with someone, I actually haven't done it in a while. It's really something I should probably get back to. I made a super, super, super detailed budget sheet.
Love it.
I live in Westchester, so it was made for Westchester ladies. So there was everything. Everything you could conceive of was on my budget list. So, $400 a month to get your hair dyed or whatever it is, So, yeah, because, the budget sheets that you see in like the typical book that you pick up at Barnes and Noble, super general.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have 5 streaming services. Life is complex. So, yeah, a super, super, super detailed. But, again, your bank statement is a great place to start, because you can kind of use that as the template for what you spend every month.
Yeah, and then also
Yeah.
those, many of you have already received these, the year-end summaries of the credit cards,
Yes.
right? Those typically you would have received before.
Right.
So I want to go back to the assets. What advice can you give to women in figuring out what assets to negotiate for during their divorce? So once you have a clear picture of what the assets are, liabilities, and also your spending, what do you advise?
Well, that's a really good question. And what I would say is that the most important thing is to understand what is not negotiable. I see all the time women come in and they say, well, he told me that I could have half of his IRA. And I say, he didn't tell you anything, because you have half of his IRA. So don't tell me that he told you he would give it to you, and isn't he being nice? So, sorry, Gary.
Yeah, no, but you make a good point of understanding legally what you're entitled to.
Yes.
What
You have
is a
to know
marital asset,
exactly.
right?
So oftentimes what I have seen is that alimony is always a really difficult topic for people. It seems to come towards the end of the negotiation. And so I would say that that can be a place where you may end up negotiating a lump sum of alimony. And, this is probably something that Lisa could comment on more specifically. But, I would say, number one, be really clear on what you are entitled to before you begin negotiating away what is rightfully yours. And I would say, certainly, you always want to prioritize retirement assets, because that, again, is like the stickiest problem that women have. Because if you think about it, for most women, there are two components to their retirement plan. One is their home, which we're hoping is going to go up in value, right? And we're going to get a few $100,000 out of that. And number two is if we have a higher earning spouse. And so in some ways, we think of our higher earning spouse as our retirement plan. Well, if he walks out the door, you need a new retirement plan. So if you are, looking for something to negotiate, and I've seen this happen, people will say, well, I didn't want to take half of his 401k because he earned it. Well, if he earned it while you were staying home and taking care of the kids, then, half of it is yours. So that's what I would say, first of all, is, primarily be careful what you give away.
And the other piece that I, have talked to individuals about is the risk of different assets. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because every asset has its own, well, of course, its own tax DNA, but it also has its own risk along with it.
Right, absolutely. And certainly once you are divorced, you need to do really a complete review of where you are in terms of risk. And that, I would say, is probably the number one thing that I do in analyzing a portfolio, is figuring out what is the risk level of the assets you're holding, and do we need to de-risk? Do we need to bring that risk down? Typically we do, because typically, you're in a period of rebuilding, and I want to make sure that everyone's going to grow in a really appropriate way. And that is like my number one rule that I follow, is to really pay attention to, allocation of assets, diversification of assets, and regular rebalancing, to really make sure that nothing's getting out of whack, and nobody owns too much tech when Facebook might drop 60%. So I am laser focused on risk for my clients, for sure.
I'd love to bring this into either Gary or Lisa, whoever feels most comfortable. We're talking about a pretty straightforward situation where it was an IRA. It was all the contributions were added to that account during the marriage from earnings during that time. What are the factors to think about if things are not that clear? Maybe that was an IRA that had a 401k rolled into it from a time when the couple was not married. And so we have some separate property there being commingled with, essentially marital money. So how would you tackle that, Gary, for someone being able to unravel that mess? Can it be unraveled?
Yeah, well, probably would have thank and thanks, Stacy and Maggie. I just want to say to everybody watching tonight, I don't spend $400 on dyeing my hair, as you can see, but I'm happy to still have it at this point. But all kidding aside, what you've got to do is you got to take a look at the prenup, if there is one, in fact, that talks about the premarital assets associated with the marriage. Number one, and number, I would probably do it on a pro rata basis. Now, the issue that you have there is also is what the earnings are, and in the earnings that occurred, you look at the asset, and let's say it was $100,000 premarital, and now it's $400,000. So you've got your denominator for your entire IRA, and you've got your numerator for the pre and post. And what you've got to do is make a determination of how to allocate the income that's been earned during that period. And the question is, though, did that investment earn assets or income it would not have earned had the assets not have been as high as they were because of the premarital assets? So it's not a black and white answer, unfortunately, but I think it's part of the negotiation that you go through as you go through the allocation of assets at the divorce time. Lisa, I'll throw it over to you from a legal perspective.
Sure. So I'm going to say one thing, which is that the person has to prove where that rollover came from. So in New York, and probably a lot of other states, the burden is on the person proving the separate property. So if there was a rollover and it was premarital and there's no prenup, let's just say there's no prenup, and all of a sudden you see this rollover coming in, you need to know where it came from. And the person who is asserting that this is premarital has to be able to show the statements. One of the problems is that sometimes statements don't go back more than 7 years. And so that could be a tricky issue in terms of this. And then the other question is, well, can they show that it couldn't have come from any other place except from being in a premarital asset? So there's various different ways to show it, but the burden is on the person asserting the separate property.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to go back to that IRA and our conversation about retirement. I was just looking at a statistic which scares the bejeebers out of me. I'm glad I'm sitting down. Social Security Office of Retirement and Disability found that roughly 20% of divorced women, 1 in 5, age 65 or older live in poverty. Okay, this is a huge number. Double of what our male counterparts are facing. And so, Maggie, can you talk to us why investing, particularly for women, is so darn important?
Definitely. Well, number one, women earn less overall than men. Sadly, that is still the case. And, at least in New York, the divorce laws have really moved toward having men and women on a more equal footing, which in terms of how things are, worked out. But the reality is that women end up earning less and taking on more of the burden of the childcare and raising the children. So the end result is that, women often find themselves living in a much decreased circumstances to their former partners. I see it every day, every single day. So what I would say is that, that is why it is so incredibly important to plan during and after your divorce, immediately after. I see many women who are so emotionally exhausted that their first inclination is to take that beautiful lump sum that they got and go out and somehow recreate, some kind of really nice, cozy home for everyone. And that may not be the best financial decision, you know, to go out immediately and buy another home. That's really a lot of women's instinct, is to recreate some sort of home. And you know, I'm here to tell you, you can do that just as well with renting. You don't have to spend that money. You would really be so much better off investing prudently with, you know, a qualified financial advisor and helping your money to grow, because that is honestly one of the best ways that you can support your children, is to help yourself and to give yourself a stable future. That is the biggest gift that you can give your children, for sure.
And that's a great point, Maggie, because what you've got to do is you've got to not only look at today or tomorrow. What you've got to do is look at a 2, 3, 5, 10-year plan and know what your revenue stream is going to be during that period of time and what your expenses are going to be. And then you could properly plan rather than trying to recreate something that you had during the marital time. You know, unfortunately, you know, as you said, you know, there's only so much to go around, and you've got to make sure that the assets are spent wisely.
Right. And also, you know, I think it's such a difficult time, and I have been through it myself, so I really do know. It's such an emotional struggle to get through that divorce, and the inclination is to make those decisions based on all of these emotions that you're feeling. But if you're making an emotional decision, you know, you may as well flip a coin, because there's no, who knows if it's a good idea or not. I don't know. It might be, but it might not. You know, that's why it's just, I think, really important to consult with professionals and really talk it through with someone. Make a financial plan. Don't make a decision based on emotions. Make it based on numbers, you know, and just be very rational and logical about planning for yourself.
So talking about important professionals, Lisa, I know you have a few questions for Gary, you know, to talk about what is their role and some important key pieces to make sure that through your divorce process and after you've made the right decisions to, you know, be on that financially secure path.
So Gary, you and I have worked on what is called a lifestyle analysis, and we do it to essentially gauge what support should be based upon the party's lifestyle in the past. So can you talk to everyone about what a lifestyle analysis is and what information you would need to gather in order for you as the accounting firm to actually perform a lifestyle analysis?
Sure. So essentially, lifestyle analysis is just what it says. It's an analysis of the lifestyle that you lived during the marriage and what you're going to encounter as you move forward in this new life that you will be having. And what we do is we take into consideration the bank statements, but we also look at things that are paid for with cash. Because it's not only the items that are paid through the bank statements, it's items anytime you spend any money whatsoever. So it's either cash, it's money dispersed out of your bank account, it's your Venmo, it's your Zelle, it's your credit card accounts. It could be other financing that you might have, believe it or not, a workday loan or something else. Anything that's going out as an expenditure, we would try and capture. And in addition to looking at the evidential matter to support our conclusions, we always sit down with the client. And the reason we sit down with the client is that we work through a worksheet, which basically will tell them what they're spending money on, because quite honestly, everybody never remembers, or I should say nobody ever remembers, proper English, all the monies that they spend on a regular basis. And believe it or not, it goes out very, very quickly. Everything from, you know, the Starbucks to this telephone bill, as you hear the phone ringing in my background. Everybody's got their house phone, they've got their cell phone. As Maggie mentioned earlier, we all have 6 different video streaming services. And you know, and you might even be paying for streaming services or items that you weren't aware of that are coming through as recurring charges on your credit card. So you really have to make sure that you capture everything that's going out. And that's the best way to give you a foundation to know what your living items are.
And that's important, Gary, both for during the divorce and for after the divorce. Do you agree with that? I mean, during the divorce, it's for what we call pendente lite support, but for after the divorce, to figure out, can you keep the home? Can you afford to continue to send your kid to camp, when you are actually figuring out what your support is that you're getting or giving, and all of those add-on expenses, you must have that whole lifestyle analysis. Do you agree with that?
I agree 100%. There's even a section in the lifestyle analysis that I like to call the heartstrings, because there's a lot of expenses that will pull on your heartstrings that you want to provide, that you're going to sacrifice other things to try and provide. But you've really got to look, as I said a few minutes ago, at the short term and the long term picture. I'm going to tell you tonight, keep your eye on the long term picture, because what will happen is that the short term items will melt away and the long term items will be with you for a much longer period of time, and they're going to really resonate as you go down this journey and as your children get older with you.
So Gary, one of the things that people come to us a lot about are looking for the assets. And so what do you look at when you're looking for those hidden assets? What are some of the areas that you look at?
Well, one of the first areas I look at, and I think it goes in tandem with the lifestyle analysis, is the income stream. And the reason I look at the income stream is because many people, and I got to tell you, there's has yet to come a cash business that I've not been able to analyze, evaluate, and determine what the true revenue stream is. I'm going to give you an example. I'm involved now in a divorce where the husband is a part owner in a restaurant, and it's a very large cash business. And the same thing. I only make a few $100s a week, or a few $1,000s a week, yada yada. What we did is we sat down and we did what's called table turns. So we looked at the restaurant, we looked at the occupancy of the seats, we looked at the menu, we looked at the average price of that menu, and calculated what the average house was bringing in on an evening. We then looked at the expenses associated to run that restaurant, and lo and behold, there was a lot more money to divide up at the end of the day than was being reported by the husband. So income stream goes hand in hand with the lifestyle. You can't have a lifestyle of somebody making $600,000 a year on a $200,000 a year salary. Either that individual's taking on debt that you're not aware of, or this individual is getting cash from various sources. Those sources could be revenue stream from their jobs, but it could be other items that you might not even be aware of. That individual could be moonlighting on a cash business that you're not aware of, and be putting, not even reporting the money. I agree 1,000% with what Maggie said earlier. Take a look at the bank statements. Look at them not only from the expenditure side, but look at it from what's hitting the bank account on a revenue side. And one other area too is very important when you do an income stream analysis. Always look to see if the proper amount of payroll taxes are being withheld. Because oftentimes people will play games. Let's say this individual is making, X number of dollars a year. They should have there's certain taxes that have to come out, Social Security, unemployment, etc. But withholding taxes, an individual really could do whatever they want with them. So what they could do is they could stop the withholding taxes, both state and federal and city, or I guess that's three things. And what they could do is take that additional cash and do what they want with it. Well, at the end of the day, who's going to be stuck with that liability? You as the spouse.
Gary, this is actually perfect timing. A question that was asked earlier tonight that I held till now when you were speaking. It actually is talking about this situation. Co-owner of a business with her spouse, he was siphoning income into a separate LLC that she did not know about. So obviously showing very low income from the business. She has found that out. What would be someone's next steps?
The next step would be to subpoena the records of that LLC, and I would turn the tables. What I would do is I would request a valuation of that LLC, because what has happened is that even though it's I'm saying this in air quotes, an alleged related party, because the spouse has set this up unbeknownst to the other spouse's knowledge, and the expense is being taken on one entity's books and records, it's being recognized as income on the others.
Mhm.
So I would clearly get a valuation of that other LLC, because it's not only the amount of money that went in, but it's how that, what has happened to that money since it went in. So you've got to look at the business on a macro basis and a micro basis. You've got to
Yeah.
look and see how that business, that, or the money that was put into that separate LLC has earned money, or was he using this to support other things, gambling, a paramour, or other expenses that you're unaware of.
And Gary, another question just came to us of where do you start if you've never had ever had any ability or been allowed to know the financial situation of the family? Where do you start?
I would go to the bank if you're on the bank account. If you can't get into the bank statements online, if you're a joint bank account, I would go to that bank office and ask for copies of the bank statements for the last 3 to 5 years. And I would do an analysis of those bank statements and look at where the expenses are going out and what kind of income was coming in, and compare that to the tax returns that you signed with your spouse.
Mhm.
Because at that point, you're going to see, Gary, correct, that there was monies missing and that there's got to be other accounts. And Stacy, I think to that person's point, they're going to have to start to exchange financial information, statements of net worth, et cetera. And you're going to be starting from scratch because you may not even have a joint bank account. And so you are going to have to start from somewhere. And that somewhere may be at, ground zero essentially, but that's why you have attorneys and people like Gary, and people like yourself and Maggie, because you may actually have to start subpoenas and depositions and all of that. And that's just a reality of going through that type of divorce.
And I would also sit down and I would sit down at your kitchen table or dining room table or whatever area you have, bedroom, and start to do your own lifestyle analysis. I would walk from Sunday through Saturday, and I would think about what you spend the money on, and then compare that to the bank statements, and do like your own little mini lifestyle analysis, and try and get a handle as to what's going out. And then you could take a look at to what's coming in into the bank statements. And if there's an anomaly between the two, as Lisa said, money's going south.
Also, just for all of you, there's some great information in the chat about documents that Gary is mentioning and Lisa, income tax returns, bank account statements, loan applications, credit card statements, business records, even public records to see if there's listing of real estate properties and cars. So there's some work that you can do on your own, but eventually, having the expertise of someone on your team is very important. I'll hand it back over to you, Lisa.
Sure. So Rona, I want to turn to you for a bit, and I want to find out what is a vocational analyst, because this is one of the things that we use this terminology during a divorce, and people look at us and say, "What is that?" So what is a vocational analyst?
So we call it a vocational analyst, we call it a vocational expert, or we've determined, we call it an employability, expert or analysis. So the purpose of that is to look at individuals and understand what skills they've acquired through their employment or non-employment, at least paid employment, and to determine what skills can be transferred to continue in current occupations or ones they've recently had, or look anew. And we do that by taking a look at prior resumes, as well as any other documentation they have about their work. It could be volunteer work as well, leadership positions. And the purpose of this, from my perspective, is to see how we can help provide an objective, clear assessment to help the parties settle, okay? So each of them can come to at least, how shall I put it, if not a reluctant agreement, an agreement that this is the number we'll settle on. And that would be how we would do it. Sometimes, however, it is used to go to court, okay? And it might be presented there. And in a small percentage of cases, I and my director have testified about that. And in that case, then it's up to the court to give it whatever weight they wish, depending on the party's testimony and counsel. And then that would result perhaps in imputed income. In other words, once an assessment has been made, we also look at the earning capacity, both very short term, like what's it going to take to get back, how long, at what level, how much will you make? And in the next 3 years or so, what that might look like. We don't go much further out than that because the rest of it becomes very speculative. And regardless of what that imputed income is, that doesn't mean that somebody has to go back to work and something they may or may not desire, but it is a number that's going to be used to determine some type of support.
So Rona, here's the question. Okay, we have, I use your services in two different ways. One is we have a spouse who all of a sudden during a divorce miraculously, or maybe not so miraculously, is now unemployed and does not go out and find another job that is commensurate with their skill level. So what do you do? What are the steps that you do in that particular case? And then I'm going to give you the second question. You have a spouse who has not worked during the entire marriage and now is being told that they need to go out and earn a living because I don't want to pay you this support. So what do you do in that particular situation? So let's start with a spouse who is asking you to evaluate the other spouse's income potential because they're not working or looking for a job or just are out of work now.
Well, when that happens, generally speaking, so this could be a voluntary action on the part of that non-working spouse. It could also be a result of a restructuring or downsizing or termination for cause. And then we have to look at the results of that and how it can impact future employability and earning capacity. One of the things we look for is when we conduct an interview, we ask them to present documentation about how they've looked for work. What exactly are they showing? How do they organize it? How do they follow up? What's the gist of the conversations and what are their next steps? And we would expect them to be evaluating that on a fairly regular basis, because if they're going down a path and getting absolutely no responses whatsoever, that's something that we want to query as well. Then we will look at job listings, job posting, if it's appropriate, to see if in fact there is a good job demand out there. We also do our research with government statistics, and we have validated salary tables that we look at that cover a wide range of occupations or professions, and we will reference that as well. We also look at how long they've been out of work. I mean, if someone has been out of work for, I don't know, let's say it's a good paid professional with a good history and they have been out of work for 5 years, there's some diminishment of ability to find work at that level, depending on the industry. So for example, sometimes finding work under those circumstances in financial services or Wall Street can be less forgiving than, say, other types of occupations. Another example would be, teachers generally could find work, but right now we're in a teacher shortage. And so we've talked to a few states about certification and some of the steps they're taking to make that easier. So those are some of the things we do. Once we kind of figure out what the labor market demand is for that person, the steps they need to take to get back in the market, then we can establish an employment income. Sometimes this happens though with a wage earner who's in their 50s or late 50s or early 60s. And then, it's not that they can't find work or even find work maybe at the comparable level, but it could take longer, more work, more effort, more diligence. Now, the other question you asked was, repeat for me one more time.
Sure. So you have a stay-at-home mom, okay, who hasn't worked for 20 years, okay, or maybe longer, okay, or maybe a little bit shorter. And now that person is being asked to, or directed, frankly, to go find work. And they can't necessarily find work. How do you put a value on that person's ability to work? What do you do to do that?
Well, first of all, again, we look at their former work history, if any. Okay, some of them have very little. Their capabilities to learn new skills, for example, on computers and things of that nature, and other types of skills that might be useful in finding work, that could pay them a reasonable living, right? The other thing we look at is how long they've been out of the workforce. So it's not uncommon for me to hear that someone has a good college degree, they had a short-term career, and they haven't been working for 20 years. And the assumption of the other spouse is that they should go back and find exactly the same thing or pick up where that, and that's just not reasonable. And so we will look at what they've been doing since. Some people have been doing things, some people have devoted themselves entirely to raising the family and taking care of the household, et cetera. So then we have to take a look at some of their interests. At that point, what are the skills they do have? What do they need minimally to get back in the market, even if it's a support position? And then we will look at how they can reposition themselves, how they can come up with, shall we say, their story. There could be lots of reasons why they haven't worked. I recently worked with someone who had stayed at home because they have a child with a certain degree of advanced developmental needs. And they've, stayed. And by the way, that's both man or woman. Okay. And then we have to figure out what's next. Part of what we run into with some of that, though, is that we get individuals who say, I can't work. There's nothing I can do. Why should I? I shouldn't have to do this. And I don't want to do this until the kids are completely out of the house. And one of the things I try to convey is we have to look long-term. And the longer you postpone even an attempt to get into the market and begin to prep yourself to do that, take the courses, start thinking about what else you can be prepared to do, the harder it is to do it later on. You're older, you have a shorter time span. And in my experience, I have found that women who return to work, any parent that goes back to work after a period of time and now has to balance with the kids in a different way, particularly in a shared custody arrangement, generally speaking, as I say, the kids may whine and they may, complain. But on the other hand, if you're really looking to take care of yourself and show your family what you can do to do that, they're generally proud of you. Okay. They don't necessarily tell you that, especially if they're
Yeah.
adolescents, but they really do get into it. So we really have to look at how you can acquire some new sets of skills or strengthen the ones you have and get up to date in the field that you might have been in. And to do that might take, significant amount of preparation, but also commitment. I must emphasize the commitment to it is important. And it's a hard time to be committed to it because emotionally we're all over the place and it's hard to think forward rather than I'm stuck. So we try to help them do that. I've also found, I think, Lisa, you've heard it too in some of our interviews where somebody doesn't have some ideas or doesn't have information. Dr. Turner and I can say, well, have you thought about, and by the way, there are some resources here you can take a look at right now. And at some point, if you want to, talk about that later, we can do that or after the litigation. But if they start taking those steps, they begin to see the possibility. And that's what we look at as well.
And let me ask a question. So now is, I think it's like the highest employability, right, in the market, right? So I guess the question is there anybody who really can't find a job? I mean, if you have a high school or a college degree and are in reasonable health and can use a computer, is there anybody who you're going to say is incapable of working or finding work?
It depends. Certainly, we've had many cases where people have certain medical issues that can limit some of their ability to be employed to the earning capacity that the other spouse is hopeful about. Also, while anybody can find a job, and you've heard judges say this as well, you can always drive an Uber or something, but that's not what I'm called in to do. I'm called in to talk about, or Dr. Turner and I talk about what's your best reasonable earning capacity considering your vocational assets is what we call them. And that includes age. We have to look at age. We have to look at education. We have to look at where you live, what the labor market is that's, reasonably commutable and things of that nature. The other thing I want to mention though, is while we are in a tight, we've been in a tight labor market right now, you've already seen headlines how things are starting to change. There's a lot of shifting that goes on all the time. I remember when nurses had a tough time getting a job, recent nursing graduates. No, it's no longer the case. We have a lot of tech jobs that are being shed. That means somebody is going to have to take a longer period of time with more effort to do so. The other thing we not teach them, but we suggest if they work with any kind of career advisor, which we recommend almost all the time for anybody who's been out of work for a while, because it's a lonely road to do this on your own, and that is networking. Networking is a natural, women are natural networkers, okay? But sometimes not in the way we think. And so I think it's very important that people learn how to do that and how to position themselves in a different way using different language. The last thing I'll mention is I've done a lot of pro bono work on resume writing, right? Improving that in presentation. And one of the mantras I deliver every single time is that your resume is not a job description, okay? People read it for a few seconds. They want to see some highlights. I call them eyebrow raisers, like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I should talk to that person. And so we do make some suggestions on that as well.
Melina, so you and I have known each other for a long time, and you're now in the divorce coaching area. Explain to everybody what a divorce coach does.
Well, I'm going to give it to you guys two ways. I think it's the most fun to visualize this. So imagine that you are in the boxing ring. It's you and your husband in the ring. You're fighting. You are at each other's throats. And you get knocked down, and you get knocked down. And maybe you get some good punches in at him. But you always see those boxers going to the corner of the ring. They get the shoulder massages from their coaches. They get the talk. They get the pep talk. They redirect strategy. When they are about to collapse, their coach is there to push them past their capability and their self-imposed limits to get back in the ring and fight to win. So that's one hardcore visualization of what a divorce coach is. I'm that person giving you tough love in the corner of the ring when you think you're knocked down and you can't get back up. The other thing, if you identify with this differently, is imagine you're the CEO of your life, okay? You're the chief executive officer of your life, but you don't know what your life is going to look like post-divorce. So if you were the CEO, who would you hire? You'd probably want someone who's a chief strategist, given that you're restructuring your entire life, you're restructuring your entire company. So imagine a divorce coach as like chief strategist during a big company corporate restructuring where you're the CEO. And so as a chief strategist, the divorce coach, I'll just put this in terms of the first person, I see all the different components of divorce. Those include the financial components, the legal, obviously, because you can't have legal counsel without a strategy informing legal counsel, because you're part of driving that strategy. You are dealing with the emotional components of divorce. You're dealing with managing children and the emotions of the children and the scheduling and logistics. You're managing a difficult ex or just reestablishing a new type of professional or cordial relationship with the ex. And you're rebuilding yourself. So you need a strategy for all of those different components. And a chief strategist is there literally to look at the entirety of your life during the divorce, before, during, and after the divorce phase, and create a strategy, which then ultimately is to create a plan, an action plan to move forward with your strategy and execute it. And so that's really what a divorce coach is and does. Certain divorce coaches specialize in different areas. My background is in finance. I have an MBA. I also run a master's degree in quantitative finance at Columbia. So I actually am in the field, career coaching people from all over the world, all different ages who are career shift changers, some who don't speak English fluently, but are incredibly talented and smart. I also am very adamant about helping men through divorce too. You know, we are a ladies group tonight, but a lot of times men are clueless when it comes to how they see themselves as a parent. So I work a lot on parenting, and I work a lot on career and finances. So those are two visualizations: boxing and being the chief executive officer of your life.
Okay, so I have to ask you this one question. So you've now told everyone you have 2 jobs essentially. Okay?
Yes.
And you raise a child. Okay.
Yes.
And that's a very tough thing to do. How do you juggle it all? And how did you juggle it as you were going through the divorce, working, taking care of your child, getting your documents, filling out your net worth statement, all those things that so many people find so overwhelming. What's your advice for that?
Number one, to accept that it's going to be overwhelming. Just accept that this is a phase in your life. It's not a forever. It's a defined part. It's a defined beginning, middle, and end, and it's a process. And accept that it's going to be hard. And so as a parent, when you are becoming a single parent, effectively, you have to understand that you're going to be the mother and the father of your household. And you can't do it to the degree that you want to do it. So being really kind to yourself and saying, I accept that life is going to be imperfect for this time period, but it's just a period of time and I'm going to get through it, is, we fear the unknown. And so accepting that there's the unknown and accepting that there's change is part of the first step of stepping into being a single parent and doing it with joy. When you're balancing a career or career changes, I tell certain people, don't make any changes. Take whatever you're in, take it down a notch. If you need to do a 4-day work week, that's okay. Or in terms of if you need to have some flexibility with your employer, ask for it. If you need to use your work as a safe haven where you can do your divorce calls, you can do your documentations. I use my office. I would stay late at the Columbia campus, and I would use my office to put all my exhibits, and I would do exhibit A, exhibit B, and I looked like a file room when I was working with Lisa on my divorce, but it was my safe place. It also work also helped with my sense of identity, because in your divorce, you are redefining who you are. I take that back. You're redefining your rediscovered identity, because you are who you are, but we lose ourselves in our marriages, trying to fill a role that others expect or suppressing our needs in order to sustain the marriage. It's time to start thinking about yourself. So when you're parenting, you're free from the other spouse interfering with your parenting or competing with your parenting or belittling you from your style of parenting. You have ownership of your household now. That was the most liberating part of becoming a single parent for myself. I also knew I had to make more money. And so even, setting the safe haven aside, setting the liberation of being a single parent, there was stress. There was financial stress because of the unknown. What do I look like in my life with a child now that I'm responsible for the household entirely? That is how I realized in the gig economy, if you have a skill, if you have a personality characteristic that is standout to your friends or in your family, maybe you're a really good connector, maybe you're a great writer, maybe you are someone who's really technical and you set up websites for your friends and your grandma, or maybe you create Facebook profiles for them. Anything that you can think of that you do in your life is transferable into the workplace. Everything in your life. So if you made yourself like a brainstorming list of all the different things you do in your life, you could suddenly piece those words together into job descriptions. And so you have to think of yourself as a brand. Like, who am I? What are my strengths? What is my value proposition? And think about it, not even in the professional context if you're not working, think about it personally. But there are so many websites now that take freelancers and female freelancers, and you can post your services, you can price them, and you can start getting experience. I see hundreds of different types of jobs. I've hired people to do work for me off of these great sites. And you can try and figure out step by step. So sometimes you have to have more than one job. And that's a fact. And a job doesn't mean 9 to 5 anymore. Jobs are remote, jobs are part-time, jobs are full-time, but 25% in the office or 75% in the office. you have to take into consideration your lifestyle as well, or your responsibilities, and pull on help from friends and family. Ask people to pick your kid up from school. Drop them off in aftercare. Don't feel guilt about toughening your kids up as a single parent, because they're going to learn the life lessons you're learning right now in divorce. They're going to learn in a gentler way by being there with you and learning to understand, financially needs versus wants. They're going to watch you make decisions about money in your household and learn really valuable lessons and respect you for the choices that you're making. So don't feel guilt about that. You are giving your children a gift. I talk about this with my partner all the time. He's divorced and has 2 kids, and I have a daughter. And we sometimes we get so teary and emotional because we feel like we're making our kids grow up so fast, having them deal with unpleasant stuff. And it's not that the kids are growing up too fast. It's that we're saving them, hopefully, a lot of grief in the future by having they're witnessing us as humans, not just as parents. And that's okay. So I said a lot of things there, but I think being a single parent is actually a gift. You get to create the household and teach your children about life the way you want to, that truly reflects your values.
One thing you just said, I just want to pick up on it real quick, is in your mind, don't answer what your children are going to answer. Ask them, because you'd be surprised what they're going to say when you ask the question. We tend to do that. We tend to ask and answer the question in our mind before we even propose it to the other party. And that's why we don't ask those questions.
I want to
do
ask
wanna-
Rona one question. Rona, I just want to ask you one question because I think it would be so valuable, frankly. What are the steps that people should take to reconnect in the workforce if they have been out of that workforce for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is? What are the steps to be the very first steps that you would take or you would advise taking?
I think the first thing I would do is just that people start getting into their Rolodex or, contacts in their phone. And if they have had any presence on LinkedIn for any reason whatsoever, to start there as well and start building that network. You don't necessarily introduce yourself as I need a job, that is off-putting and it puts people in an awkward position. But in order to say, I'm in a change, I'd like to get together, I'd like to run some ideas by you. And you'd be surprised, people can be very generous about referring you to someone, saying, well, I don't know about that, but so-and-so who I spoke with about a year ago is very good at this. I could make you can ask for the intro. You have to get over this, not being able to feeling like, you're asking for favors. You're not asking for a favor. You're asking for somebody to help you out, with the idea that you will do the same with them at some point as well. Networking really is a quid pro quo. We take it in, we give it back. It's what goes around comes around. So that's one of the first steps I would do. The other thing I would do is probably keep a log or a journal of who I've been in contact with. What did we discuss? Did I get an idea from it? Where does it go from here? Did they tell me something that I can follow up? Maybe that it isn't that hard to get back in, or maybe take it in a different direction. But to really start using your peer group for that, do some volunteering. If you haven't been out and working in a place where you have met more colleagues in a while, get involved with your community and nonprofits and volunteering. And I don't mean just the PTA, although the PTA can be very helpful. I mean, really getting out there and trying to figure out, maybe by doing some research, where are companies sponsoring? What do they have days, where they give up, where they, help an organization? Does it interest me? What can I do? And you might start with a very little role, right? But that grows and you get to know people. And the second time you go, more people and you feel more at home. It's also very important, because I think during the divorce process, to what Melina said, is that it can be very isolating. Your relationships with friends and family is different. It's fractured. You don't know where you stand, and they don't either. There's a lot of conflicting loyalties. And I think it's very important to, even though you're crazy with all the work you have to do, the paperwork your lawyer is asking you to do, and the appearances at court, you've got to put yourself in a position where you are in the world. and you are listening and asking questions, and try to have a bit of a plan, in terms of what are you thinking about in terms of getting back. And that's where the career advisors are so helpful. And it doesn't have to be a long-term, like, it isn't therapy. It's to really help you figure things out, get on a path, know the steps you have to take, what research, check out your ideas. Yeah, this looks promising. No, this does not. And then figure out from there what I need to keep moving forward. And I want to echo what Melina said, which I alluded to before, which is, it's really hard, and the guilt thing comes up in almost any interview I take, men and women. But I think we underestimate our children. And I think that, yeah, they go through a tough time. They do have resilience. And I am perfect. And I do know that a lot of them have never talked about the fact that you stay at home, and they appreciate it. But now you're growing too. And you have to look at the idea that if someone is 12 years old, those 6 years, those 7 years before they leave, boom, just like that. And if you wait that long, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And I want to emphasize how this can enrich your thinking and help you start thinking ahead. And that's part of the psyche that we have to really work with.
And Rona, if I might just add one thing about getting out there,
Mhm.
look on Eventbrite. Go to Eventbrite and look for conferences. You can type in categories, you can type in cities, dates, you can just have general, I think they'll send you even pop-ups in your email, but conferences are great to start networking, but to learn about the industries you're interested in, or the different service providers, or the stack of like what's involved in this industry, whatever it is, if it's the HR industry, if it's the tech industry, if it's accounting, there's so much. People love to connect in conferences, and you can always ask the conference organizer for a complimentary ticket. They're often generous with that.
And
Can I just add something? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rona.
No, I was just going to say that sometimes, some people are looking to get back into something close to what they did. And when you go to conferences, you're presenting yourself and you're learning things all the time and figure out where you need to rustle up some more, current skills and things of that nature. And that maybe, it's probably not as hard. Someone once told me that they hired someone who was, kind of coming in there. They didn't know anybody. They hadn't been in the industry a long time. But they were putting themselves out there. And that in and of itself was something that somebody was interested in striking up a conversation with. So I guess to that, maybe sometimes it's really getting into a little bit of a non-coaching group, but something that kind of helps you gain more confidence in your speech. And, like Toastmasters and things like that, they're terrific organizations because they help you figure out how to present, how to be clear, how to be confident. And sometimes that can make a big difference, in how you feel about yourself as well as others feeling about you.
And sorry, one more thing about education. Often the confidence factor comes from thinking you need to know everything about the role you're stepping into. Wipe that away. You don't need to be an expert stepping into it. But it's the perfect time right now after COVID to tap into remote education opportunities where you can do certifications, you can do course modules. Coursera has a lot of free and paid courses, but you can take courses from Yale professors, from Columbia professors. Tap into that, because if you have skills that you want to learn, go learn Python, learn coding for free online. Like, it's at your fingertips, and that might help also really rebuild the confidence factor that, like, hey, been out of the workforce for how many years, but I can still learn. I'm still great at this. This is what I loved doing as a kid. And it's there. We're lucky now that we can do remote education. That's a really big benefit.
And sometimes, as Dr. Turner has pointed out to people we've interviewed at Coursera, sometimes the courses are expensive to start, but if you wait or you keep looking, they drop down in price dramatically. So you shouldn't let that necessarily stand in your way. Just keep at it. But yeah, the remote thing has been immensely helpful in terms of getting people on their feet.
Maggie, I'd love for you to chime in, and then I know we want to open it up for questions too.
Sure. Just real quick, I loved hearing everything that you were talking about, Melina and Rona, about career. And I just wanted to share quickly this story because, you know, here I am, I work at Morgan Stanley, and it's possible that some of you have the impression that maybe I, you know, just like walked into this job after college. But in fact, I'm a single mother of 3 children. I went through a horrible divorce. And in 2012, I was in a rough place. I really had very, very little resources. And I could not get a job in finance, could not, to save my life. I mean, I applied for hundreds of jobs. I finally, in desperation, signed up for courses at NYU, and they have a, you know, graduate program in finance and taxation. So I was taking a class. Just by chance, they had a networking event. I don't even remember this networking event. I went, I thought, okay, I'll just show up. No, I mean, I didn't even know what half the people were talking about, to be honest. I wasn't working in the field. Afterwards, I went on LinkedIn, saw someone I had seen at this event. I said, loved hearing you speak. I don't remember I have no idea what she said. Loved hearing you speak. Would love to talk about what you do and hear more about it. People love to talk about themselves, so invite them to tell you about what they do. She said, call my office tomorrow. And then I called her office. She said, send me your resume. I sent her my resume, and no joke, that is how I got my first job in finance. It really
Love
was
it.
cool. I made
Love your
some
story.
Tenacity.
well,
Yeah, it's
but you know what?
tenacity.
I really just put myself in the way of other people who were doing what I wanted to do. I literally just did that. And somehow, you know, it really, and one job led to the next is really what happened. I had one job, and then I got a better job, and then I got a better job. And here I am.
It's getting that first job. It's getting that first job, right?
Yeah, and then
Absolutely.
working up from there. So I want to open it up for Q&A, and I know there's been a lot of questions, everything from the gig economy and how to, you know, make money on your own terms, your own time, to networking. We even have networking for introverts, anything you can imagine. We have over 20 different TED Talk like videos on the Savvy Ladies website. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat. So all you have to do is click on that, and you're going to see every single topic you could ever imagine, leveraging LinkedIn for your job search, using your network when you haven't touched your network for career in decades, and how to dust that off. So there's great information in here, and you will see some people that you know, such as Rona and some other fantastic speakers that we have there. But let me open it up. Would anyone like to unmute and ask a question? We can take a couple questions. I know we might not be able to get to everything, but we will be able to also, I'm going to drop in the chat the the URL address for the helpline as well. But if anyone wants to go ahead and unmute, feel free to ask any questions of our experts.
Yeah, I have a question for Gary, if that's okay.
Yes.
Gary.
Great.
It's to do with your
Maybe,
it's to do
please.
with the forensic expertise that you have.
Turn it down. You gotta pause it for a second, please.
I just want to know,
Sorry.
because I'm in a divorce where everything is extremely one-sided. For 20 years, I've not known about our finances. He's controlled every single thing. The disclosures have been made. However, there are so many holes in it. So we're going to be looking for forensic accounting. Now, my question really is it better to just have one of my own? Because the next hearing, they're going to look at the RSUs, and the 2 lawyers have to decide on that particular forensic accountant. Going forward, should I just have my own, somebody to advocate for me to prove to speak about my side of the story in the findings?
Yeah, I've been appointed as a neutral by many judges as well as attorneys that want to use me as a neutral. So I'd happy to throw my hat in the ring. But you're right. Even if the 2 attorneys agree on a neutral accountant, it's never a bad idea to have somebody be an advocate for you, because they're going to be watching out for you, and you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. because it's just that one person's opinion. And
Yeah.
you want to make sure that, and again, you only get one bite of the apple. So you want to make sure you
Right.
get the biggest bite you could possibly get.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just going to add in something, if I may. When you have your own advocate, as Gary would say, your own forensic accountant, I think that there is a difference. As a lawyer working with a forensic accountant side by side, it is very different than working with a neutral. And if there's a lot of holes in the discovery and a lot of holes in what's out there, you may really want to have your own person who is going to be able to dig into those holes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome, and best of luck. And
Thank you.
RSUs are very, for lack of a better term, unusual compensation arrangements. Not a lot of people have them, but they could be very, very beneficial. So you have to make sure that you look at it the proper way.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
involved
for
in a
the
case right
RSU
now with them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because the RSU, they're saying to, the lawyer said that they're saying to share one accountant and then, they'll say what it is. But the lawyer did say, if you want to hire your own to look over the figures of what they've actually produced, then you could actually do that rather than having your own, because they're very expensive.
Pleasure to help you in that area. And just for those of you that are not familiar with it, RSUs are restricted stock units, and they're issued to certain employees of certain corporations that are not readily tradable, but they do have a significant value.
Because a lot of his salary is on RSU because his base salary is very low. But that's how they compensate.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the issue is that the compensation also might have been less because he was issued these RSUs. So you want to make sure that you get your fair share, especially if
Yeah.
you've been in the marriage for the 20 years that you've disclosed.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Question
welcome. You're
for
very
you,
welcome.
Rona. Someone just had asked, do you ever have evaluations where, because of medical issues, age, that they actually really cannot go back to work and imputing income to them would not be appropriate?
Yes, we've had some of those, particularly with medical issues. I will say with the medical issues, what we look for is some statement from a treating medical practitioner about their functional work capacity. Not medical records necessarily, but some statement. We have a whole questionnaire and other type of document that makes it very specific to what are the limitations and why, and then we can figure out how they may or may not be accommodated. As far as age is concerned, that's been kind of interesting. I've heard judges say for people as old as 66, yeah, you can go out and do something. And maybe they can, but for how much, for one thing, and then to the individual to figure out whether they really need to or not. And I think one of the things that we've also looked at here today is how you need to make decisions financially about what's right for you. So you may decide that whatever that modest amount of income can be, it's not worth what it's taking out. But medical conditions do come up on a not infrequent basis. Sometimes I will add, sometimes they come up and they've had it before, and maybe it kind of got really big once the divorce started. And sometimes there's a lot of legitimacy. It just depends.
And we have another hand up, Takira Baker. If you want to unmute, feel free.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mouth
Perfect.
wasn't
Yeah, no,
working.
I still do the unmute
Yeah.
3
so-
years into COVID.
Okay, so I have a question. I'm not sure who's best to answer it, but I'm just gonna ask. So if all the bills are in one spouse's name, would the higher earning spouse still be ordered to pay alimony or separate support?
So it does, and I'll have Lisa jump in, but it doesn't really matter whose bills, whose name they are in. If you are separating and getting a divorce, you're going to have bills that are going to be solely in your name now, your own housing, utilities, and so forth. Unless there is an agreement where the other partner is willing to pay expenses for a certain period of time. Lisa, why don't you jump in?
Sure. So are we talking about during the pendency of the divorce or after the divorce?
So
Question.
more so for during. So there needs to, I want something to support me financially while we go through the divorce process, but all the bills are in my name. Would he still be ordered?
Okay, so then you need what we call pendente lite support, child support, spousal support, because what's going to happen is that if you don't get that, you're going to be stuck with all these bills that are in your name. And frankly, he's not going to care about those bills because they're in your name. And it's going to be your credit that's going to be hurt if they can't get paid. So it's really important that you actually get some sort of a spousal and or child support award so that you can then pay those bills each month. You don't want him actually paying those bills directly if you can help it, because as I said, if they're in your name, he's not going to care if he pays late. He's not going to care if he doesn't pay at all. If he pays a month late, 2 months late, and it's going to really mess up your credit. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Okay, so let me just reiterate what I heard. So I heard that regardless of whose name the bills is in, he's still required to support.
So what you heard is that there should be some level of support, particularly if he's the person who earns more money in the marriage, okay? And that level of support will be determined upon deciding how much you earn and how much he earns, or how much he could earn and how much you could earn, right? It goes back to the imputing of income. And if there is a level of support, then you would be able to utilize those monies to pay off those bills each month.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just ask
Yes.
Can I just ask Lisa, following from what you've just said, if the bills are all in his name, but now he's paying support, are you're responsible to pay for the bills while you're staying in the house, although it's in his name because he's paying support?
So that may be the case. It depends upon the level of support. So sometimes, for example, when we actually put in what's called a motion for support, we ask that the person pay the mortgage, the taxes, okay? Somebody pay those, okay? The mortgage, the taxes, the utilities, the health insurance, unreimbursed medical expenses, et cetera. And then in addition to that, if they are the person who makes more of the money, okay, or all of the money, that they then also give a certain amount of spending money to the other spouse so that they can pay for the groceries and the extracurricular activities and all of those other things that come along, the gasoline in your car, all of those other things that come along. So it's really not about whose name the bills are in. It's about making sure that there's enough support to cover the lifestyle, understanding that it may not always cover the lifestyle because maybe there are now 2 different households that everybody is living in, and 2 households need more funding than 1 household needed.
So you could actually say, can't you, that you can't pay the bills because of the amount of support you get? Because I've basically been told what I can't pay, and if I can't afford it, I'll just have to move.
Well, so your circumstances may be such that may be the case. I don't know. It also may not be the case. It depends upon what the income should be, okay, and whether they've discovered all the income, because you had mentioned earlier that there were holes. And so I think when you figure out what those holes are, that might help answer this question, right? Of whether or not you would have to move, or whether or not you can actually meet those bills based upon support. I think that, and those RSUs are going to be a key piece of that.
Yes,
right?
that's it, because I haven't got that at the moment. Yeah.
Right.
That's why
And
the lifestyle analysis is so important. That's
Exactly.
really the key.
Okay.
exactly.
I want
Thank you.
one last question. Jill, your hand is up, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening. And I just want to say a great big thank you for everyone staying. I know we're going over time, but you can tell now, very few people are even leaving because there's such great content here. Jill, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? You're unmute, my dear. If you want to go ahead and unmute, you can, and That way we can hear you. There you
Okay.
go.
I don't know if my video is on because I don't see the light.
It is on.
Oh, okay, perfect. So going to the question that was just, first of all, I had a brief conversation with Maggie a week or so ago, which is super helpful, but this conversation that you're having just now with the recent attendee. So my spouse had stopped supporting me and left me with the credit card bills, which apparently I'm the primary on the account. However, he had been using the credit cards. So I'm wondering if that's an opportunity for me to be able to recoup all the money that I've been paying since he cut me off financially in the mediation. Now, here in the state of Florida, you can ask for temporary relief. However, you cannot get any temporary relief until you go to mediation. And he has been postponing mediation now 3 times for the course of many, many months. So what's happening is we had sold our family home, and I had made, you know, the money from that was quite healthy, and I was planning to use that for my retirement and going into the future. However, now that I'm paying all of those credit card bills, it's dwindling down. So my question is, you know, do I have any hope of recouping that in the negotiation and the mediation?
So I'm going to say this. I think that number one, you need to find a really great, if you don't have one, a really great Florida attorney.
I have
Because, okay, so that, you know, we don't have that rule about mediation in New York. And our support starts from the time that you actually file the summons. If you ask for the support, it's retroactive from at the end all the way back to the beginning. And we can file motions when you need support. So I would be very hesitant to give you any advice on that particular issue. I really think you need to go back to your attorney and ask, what is the solution to this problem? Because you're going to be dragged along. There must be some solution out there for somebody who doesn't go to the mediation.
Right. So the solution will be, because he has an attorney who is, you know, notorious for this type of behavior. However, the court, my attorney can ask for a case status management conference and get it moving forward. But I think that's what their goal is right now, is to dwindle down that money that I have, you know, to survive on in the interim. I'm just wondering though, I did a little digging, and he stopped using the credit card because he thought that would keep him absolved from it. And the credit card was established to increase his credits. However, I did discover that he had been using it on occasion. So therefore he is using the card. There's a record of it. But I'm just wondering, if I'm the primary on that account, if I can recoup all that money that I had paid, or at least half of it in the negotiation.
You really got to check with your counsel down there in the mediator, because it's such a unique attribute for your state.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it's Florida.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your sunshine. I do want to just say a great big thank you to everyone. And before you go, I need to show you this. So you'll see, this is our next event, February 15th, and getting a divorce. How can I tell if I'm being spied on? So, you know, how do you make sure that you are being protected? But also, we will have a discussion more about what are some of the things that you can do to try and unearth more information about your finances, especially if you on purpose have been really distanced from the finances. And then, of course, please do reach out to our financial helpline for women. You just click on here. It goes to the Savvy Ladies website, jump to the request form, and I'll show you what the request form. This is it. And then you are matched with an expert to work with you free of charge through Savvy Ladies. We're a 501c3. Please do reach out. We have fantastic experts. Many of our panelists are actually volunteers on the helpline too. So I just want to say a great big thank you to our fantastic panelists, my wonderful host and presenter, Lisa Zeiderman. And I'll kick it on over to you, Judy, to give a warm hug and close out the evening. Thank you for making this possible.
Yeah, that's really it, everyone. It's really a fantastic evening. I think we all learned so much and so many questions. Please feel free to visit the helpline. We are here for you. And thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for our supporters. We couldn't do it without all of you. Have a great evening, everyone.